The crimson sands of Iridia Prime stretched to the horizon, a seemingly endless expanse painted gold and scarlet by the setting sun. Dunes rippled like waves frozen in time, their peaks casting long shadows across the desert floor. Cyrus Aiken trudged through this desolate landscape, each step sinking into the loose sand, sweat beading beneath his protective gear despite the cooling evening air. Sci, as he preferred to be called, adjusted the scanner strapped to his forearm and checked its readout. The device had detected a metallic anomaly buried just beneath the surface of a nearby dune. Another piece of war debris, most likely. The conflict between the colonial governors and Earth's corporate overlords had transformed these remote dunes into convenient dumping grounds for all manner of equipment and supplies. Sometimes dangerous, sometimes valuable. Always worth investigating. He was a scavenger now, though he'd once been a salvage diver on the ocean planet Nereus. The skills transferred well enough: locate, extract, and profit. But the terrain couldn't have been more different. Instead of crushing depths and currents, he battled heat, dehydration, and the ever-shifting sands. Yet the fundamental rule remained the same. Survival depended on finding what others had lost or abandoned. Sci reached the coordinates his scanner had indicated and began to dig. The exertion made his breathing labored inside his filtration mask, but he continued methodically, scooping away handfuls of crimson sand. 20 minutes later, his gloved fingers struck something solid. Metal. Definitely. Excitement quickened his movements as he cleared away more sand, revealing the sharp edge of what appeared to be a crate. Not just any crate, an imperial crate, bearing the faded insignia of Earth's corporate military. Jackpot, he muttered, voice muffled by his mask. Imperial supplies typically meant quality goods. Weapons, medicine, tech. All highly valuable on the black markets that thrived in the shadow of civil war. Sci dug faster, uncovering more of the container. It was a standard military drop box, roughly 2 meters long and 1 meter wide, designed for automated deployment from low-orbit vessels. The unusual part was finding it here, far from any recognized drop zone. As the last of the sand fell away, Sci examined the crate more carefully. No external damage was visible, which was promising. The locking mechanism appeared intact, though oddly configured, sealed from the inside rather than the outside. That detail gave him pause. Imperial crates were typically secured externally to prevent theft. A box locked from within suggested, what? A malfunction? A last-minute security measure? The sun had nearly disappeared beyond the horizon. Soon the desert's bitter cold would replace the day's scorching heat. Sci needed to make a decision, attempt to open the crate here or mark its location and return with better equipment. The promise of valuable salvage won out. He knelt beside the container and reached for the latch. His fingers had barely touched the metal when a sound emerged from within. A static-laced crackle that made him snatch his hand back as though burned. The static cleared, resolving into a voice, female, trembling, and unmistakably frightened. Please, it whispered, distortion warping the edges of the word. Don't open. Sci scrambled backward, heart hammering against his ribs. Voices didn't come from empty crates. Voices meant people. And people in sealed imperial containers meant complications he couldn't afford. Who's in there? He demanded, hand instinctively moving to the blaster holstered at his hip. No response came, only the soft hiss of static. I said, who's in there? Sci repeated, louder this time. Identify yourself. The static returned briefly, then cleared. They'll find us both. Please. Go. Sci hesitated, torn between curiosity and self-preservation. His scanner hadn't detected life signs, which meant either it was malfunctioning or whatever was inside that crate wasn't entirely human. Neither possibility was comforting. The logical choice was to walk away. This wasn't his problem. He was a scavenger, not a rescuer. His business was with abandoned things, not living complications. Yet he remained rooted in place, memories surfacing unbidden. 5 years earlier, the submerged ruins of Colony Nexus 7. Sci and his salvage partner, Marrow, had detected a pocket of air in a sealed section of the colony's administrative building. They'd found survivors inside, a family of 4, trapped when the colony flooded. Marrow had argued against attempting a rescue. Too risky, he'd said. Not worth sacrificing their haul. Sci had insisted. They'd try to save the family, then return for the salvage. But the structural integrity of the building had failed during the rescue attempt. Water had rushed in, crushing equipment and people alike. Only Sci had escaped. The family, Marrow, all gone in moments because Sci had made the wrong call. The weight of that memory had driven him from the oceans to these endless sands, where the only lives at stake were those foolish enough to cross his path. He'd sworn never to make that mistake again. Survival first, always. Yet here he was, faced with another choice. Another voice pleading for help. "Damn it all!" Sci growled, moving back toward the crate. He examined the latch more carefully now. It was indeed designed to be opened from inside, but something had jammed the mechanism. "I'm going to open this," he announced. "Don't try anything stupid." No response came. Sci retrieved a multi-tool from his belt and began working on the latch. It took several minutes of careful manipulation, but eventually, something clicked. The lid loosened slightly. "Last chance," Sci warned. "Any surprises in there, and I'm sealing you back up and leaving you to the sands." Again, silence answered him. With a deep breath, Sci threw open the lid and stepped back quickly. Blaster drawn. The interior of the crate was dimly lit by emergency lighting strips along its sides. Lying within was a figure, humanoid, but decidedly not human. Its skin was a pale lavender, almost translucent in places, revealing a network of darker purple veins beneath. Large, almond-shaped eyes, solid black without discernible pupils, blinked up at him. The being's limbs were long and slender, ending in delicate digits with too many joints. She, based on the voice, wore what appeared to be a torn environmental suit, dark stains spreading across its torso. "You're Novalian," Sci breathed, recognizing the species, refugees from the Nova Centauri system, fleeing imperial expansion, rare, valuable, and very illegal to transport. The alien's eyes widened in fear. She attempted to sit up but collapsed back with a pained gasp. The dark patches on her suit glistened wetly. Blood, or whatever passed for it among her kind. "They're coming," she whispered, voice clearer now that the crate was open. "You should run." As if summoned by her warning, Sci's scanner emitted a series of urgent beeps. He glanced at the display and cursed. Multiple signals approaching from the north. Imperial patrol drones, based on their signature. They must have detected the crate's opening. "What did you do?" Sci demanded, turning back to the wounded alien. "Tracking, in the crate," she managed, each word an effort. "Activated when opened." Sci's mind raced. The drones would be on them within minutes. He could still walk away, leave the alien to her fate. The Empire wouldn't care about a lone scavenger if they got what they were after. But that would mean abandoning her to certain death or worse. The Empire's scientists had a particular interest in Novalian physiology. With a muttered curse, Sci holstered his blaster and leaned into the crate. "Can you walk?" The alien tried again to rise, this time with Sci's assistance. She was lighter than expected, almost fragile beneath his hands. Her skin felt cool and slightly damp, like fine silk left in morning dew. "My name, Amara," she said as he helped her from the crate. "Save your strength," Sci replied gruffly. "We need to move." He glanced at his scanner again. The drones were closing fast. 2 escape routes presented themselves, east toward the constantly shifting dunes known locally as the Crawling Sea, or west toward the rocky foothills that marked the beginning of rebel territory. The dunes offered better concealment, but greater physical challenges. The foothills meant potential safety, but a longer, more exposed journey. "The dunes," Amara whispered, as if reading his thoughts. "Water there." Sci frowned. "There's no water in the Crawling Sea. It's just sand." "Trust," she replied. the single word somehow heavier than any argument. Trust was a luxury Sai had abandoned years ago, along with hope and idealism. Yet something in those alien eyes, something ancient and knowing, made him hesitate. The dunes it is, he decided, supporting her weight as they began moving east. But if this is a trick... He left the threat unfinished as they struggled across the cooling sand. Night was falling rapidly now, the temperature dropping by the minute. Soon they would face the desert's other deadly extreme. Sai activated the thermal lining of his jacket with his free hand, the fabric warming instantly. He awkwardly adjusted it to cover Amara as well. "Why are the Imperials tracking you?" he asked as they walked, partly to keep her conscious, partly out of genuine curiosity. Amara's breathing had become labored, her steps increasingly unsteady. "I carry knowledge of weapon, bioweapon." Sai nearly stumbled. Bioweapons were among the most restricted technologies in known space, banned by every civilized world. Even the Empire officially denounced their use, though rumors persisted of secret research programs. "What kind of bioweapon?" Amara shook her head weakly. "Designed for my kind. Specific. Genocide." The implications were chilling. A targeted bioweapon could eliminate an entire species while leaving others unharmed. The perfect tool for imperial pacification of troublesome alien populations. If Amara carried information about such a project, her value to both the Empire and the rebels was incalculable. And here was Sai, a simple scavenger, caught in the middle of it all. The scanner beeped again, more urgently this time. The drones had changed course, adjusting to their heading. Sai picked up the pace as much as Amara's condition allowed, half dragging her toward the first of the massive dunes that comprised the crawling sea. They reached the base of the dune just as the first drone appeared on the horizon behind them, its searchlight cutting through the deepening gloom. Sai pulled Amara into the shadow of the towering sand mountain, praying the darkness would conceal them long enough to climb to safety. "We need to get over this dune," he explained, looking up at the imposing slope. "Can you manage it?" Amara nodded weakly, though Sai doubted the truth of that assessment. Nevertheless, they began to climb, each step sinking deep into the loose sand, progress agonizingly slow. The drone drew closer, its light sweeping methodically across the desert floor. Halfway up the dune, Amara stumbled and fell to her knees. Sai crouched beside her, aware of their exposure, of the drone's inexorable approach. "Come on," he urged, trying to help her up. "Just a little farther." Amara looked at him, those black eyes somehow conveying a depth of emotion no human gaze could match. "Leave me," she whispered. "Save yourself." For a moment, Sai was tempted. It would be the rational choice, the survivor's choice, the choice Mara would have made without hesitation. Instead, he lifted Amara into his arms. "Not happening," he grunted, resuming the climb with his burden. Each step was torture now, his muscles burning with the effort. But something drove him forward, perhaps defiance, perhaps foolishness, perhaps some long-buried sense of decency the desert hadn't quite scoured away. They crested the dune just as the drone's searchlight swept over their previous position. Sai didn't pause to celebrate the narrow escape, but continued down the other side, sliding and stumbling through cascading sand until they reached the trough between dunes. He set Amara down gently and checked his scanner. The drone was circling the first dune, its programming apparently unable to determine whether to pursue over the top or around the base. It wouldn't hesitate for long. "We need to keep moving," he told Amara, who nodded weakly. As they prepared to tackle the next dune, a distant rumble reached them, not from behind where the drone patrolled, but from ahead. Sai looked up to see the crest of the next dune shifting, sand cascading down its face in an accelerating avalanche. "Sinkhole," Amara gasped. "Around, not over." Sai didn't question her warning. The crawling sea was notorious for its quagmires, vast sinkholes where the sand behaved almost like quicksand, drawing down anything unlucky enough to be caught when a pocket collapsed. They altered course, moving parallel to the dune rather than attempting to cross it, The next hour passed in a haze of exhaustion and vigilance. They navigated the treacherous landscape by scanner readings and Amara's uncanny warnings, staying just ahead of the Imperial drones that had multiplied to 3, then 5. Twice they nearly blundered into sinkholes. Once they were almost spotted when a drone changed its search pattern unexpectedly. Throughout their flight, Amara's condition deteriorated. The stains on her environment suit had spread, and her skin had taken on an ashen quality that couldn't be healthy for her species. She needed medical attention soon, or all of Sci's efforts would be for nothing. Just when it seemed they could go no farther, Amara tugged weakly at Sci's sleeve and pointed ahead. Barely visible in the darkness stood a structure, the remains of an abandoned outpost, its walls half buried by the ever-shifting sands. "There," she whispered, "water." Sci consulted his scanner. The drones were currently searching a different sector, but that could change at any moment. The outpost offered shelter and the possibility of supplies, but also the risk of entrapment if the Imperials located them. Worth the risk, he decided aloud, guiding them toward the ruins. The outpost had once been a monitoring station, one of dozens established during the initial colonization of Iridia Prime. Long abandoned, its exterior was weather-beaten and sand-scoured, windows broken and doors hanging from rusted hinges. Yet the basic structure remained sound, its walls offering protection from both the elements and prying electronic eyes. Sci helped Amara through a gap where a door had once been, into the relative darkness of the interior. His eyes adjusted slowly, revealing a space cluttered with broken furniture and equipment. Dust and sand covered every surface, undisturbed for years until their arrival. "Water," Amara repeated, gesturing weakly toward what had once been a maintenance corridor. "Let me check first," Sci insisted, easing her down against a wall. He drew his blaster, activated its underslung light, and cautiously moved in the direction she had indicated. The corridor led to a small room filled with machinery. Environmental controls, mostly long defunct. But in the corner stood something promising, an emergency water recycler, the kind designed to continue functioning even when main power failed. Sci approached it carefully, hardly daring to hope. He brushed away years of accumulated dust from its control panel and pressed the diagnostic button. A soft hum emanated from the machine, and a green light flickered to life. It still worked. More importantly, according to the gauge, its reservoir was nearly full, probably condensation collected over years from the desert's occasional humidity. Sci found a relatively clean container among the debris and filled it with water from the recycler's tap. The liquid that emerged was clear and, according to his portable scanner, free of harmful contaminants. He returned to Amara, who had slumped further down the wall in his absence. "You were right," he admitted, kneeling beside her and offering the water. "How did you know?" Amara drank deeply before answering. When she spoke, her voice was slightly stronger. "My people. Sense water, even deep underground. Evolutionary adaptation." Sci nodded, filing away this information about Novalian biology. "We should be safe here for a while. Let me look at your wound." Amara hesitated, then nodded permission. Sci carefully examined the environmental suit, finding a tear along the torso where something sharp had penetrated. The wound beneath was unlike any human injury. The lavender skin had parted to reveal not red muscle, but a complex structure of purplish filaments that pulsed faintly. "I don't know how to treat this," Sci admitted. "I don't have the right medical supplies for your physiology." "The suit," Amara explained, "self-repairing, give it time." As if to confirm her words, Sci noticed the edges of the tear in the fabric seemed to be slowly, almost imperceptibly, drawing together. Whatever technology the suit employed, it was far beyond the standard equipment he was familiar with. "Rest, then," he suggested, settling back against the wall beside her. "I'll keep watch." For a time, they sat in silence, the only sounds their breathing and the occasional distant cry of a desert creature. Sci checked his scanner periodically, but the drones remained at a distance, their search pattern suggesting they had lost the trail. Why help me? Amara asked eventually, her voice stronger now, though still bearing that strange, melodic quality that marked her as non-human. Sai didn't answer immediately. It was a question he'd been asking himself since the moment he'd decided not to abandon her. The sensible answer, that her information about the bioweapon was valuable, wasn't entirely honest. Something else had driven his decision, something he was reluctant to examine too closely. "I've left someone behind before," he said finally. "It didn't sit well." Amara studied him with those depthless black eyes. "The water colony," she said. "Nexus 7. Sai stiffened. "How do you know about that?" "When you touched me. Telepathic impression. Not reading thoughts, just echoes. Strong emotions leave traces." "You're psychic?" Sai moved slightly away, uncomfortable with the idea that his memories might not be entirely his own. "Not like your stories. Limited. Contact required. Emotional only." She paused. "Your guilt. Very strong." Sai looked away. "Yeah, well, 5 people died because I made the wrong call. That tends to leave a mark." "Wrong call?" Amara tilted her head questioningly. "I should have listened to my partner. Should have left the family there, called for proper rescue. Instead, I tried to be a hero." Sai's voice turned bitter. "All I did was get everyone killed." Amara was silent for a long moment. "You tried to help," she said finally. "No shame in that." "Results matter more than intentions," Sai countered. "Sometimes." Amara agreed. "Sometimes not." She reached out tentatively, her many-jointed fingers hovering near his hand but not quite touching. "You try again now. With me. Brave." Sai shook his head, uncomfortable with her assessment. "Not brave, just stupid, probably." He changed the subject abruptly. "Tell me about this bioweapon. What exactly do you know?" Amara withdrew her hand. "I was researcher, geneticist. Empire captured my team. Forced us to work on weapon, targeted virus, affects only Novalian physiology." "And you escaped with the research?" "With cure," she corrected. "They succeeded in creating virus. I developed countermeasures secretly, stole sample of both." She gestured to a small pouch attached to her suit that Sai hadn't noticed before. "Here. Must reach Rebel Alliance. Stop deployment." The implications were staggering. If the Empire deployed such a weapon, it would mean the extinction of an entire sentient species. The diplomatic consequences alone would be catastrophic, potentially uniting the neutral systems against Earth's corporate government. It could escalate the civil war into a galactic conflict. "Why target your people specifically?" Sai asked. "Novalian world's rich in rare minerals. Empire wants resources, not inhabitants." Amara's tone was matter-of-fact, but Sai could see the pain behind her words. "Easier to eliminate than relocate." Before Sai could respond, his scanner emitted a warning tone. He checked the display and cursed softly. "Drones," Amara guessed. Sai shook his head grimly. "Worse, personnel carrier. They've called in human forces." The scanner showed a larger vessel approaching the outpost directly, its signature matching Imperial troop transports. Unlike the drones, human soldiers would conduct a thorough search of any potential hiding place. Their time in the outpost had just run out. "We need to move," Sai decided, rising and gathering their meager supplies. "The foothills are still our best bet. If we can reach rebel territory." He broke off as the scanner beeped again, this time with a proximity alert. The transport was landing, not near the outpost as he'd feared, but directly on top of it. The Empire had found them. "No time," Amara said, struggling to her feet. "They're here." Sai quickly assessed their options. The outpost had only one entrance that he'd seen, the way they'd come in. There might be another exit through the maintenance areas, but finding it would take time they didn't have. Fighting was suicide. A standard Imperial transport carried at least 6 soldiers, all better armed and armored than a lone scavenger. "The water recycler room," he decided. It's defensible, and they might miss it in a quick sweep. They hurried back down the corridor, Amara moving more easily now that she'd rested and hydrated. The recycler room was small, with only one entrance and no windows. A potential death trap, but also their best chance at avoiding immediate discovery. They had barely concealed themselves when the sounds of the transport's landing gear engaging came from above, followed by the thud of boots on the outpost's roof. Orders were shouted, voices harsh and professional. Then came the sound of cutting tools. The Imperials were creating their own entrance rather than using the compromised doorways. Sai positioned himself between the corridor entrance and Amara. Blaster drawn. It was a pathetically inadequate defense against Imperial soldiers, but it was all he had to offer. Amara, meanwhile, had retrieved a small vial from the pouch at her waist, presumably the virus sample or its cure. She held it carefully, as though weighing a decision. The sounds of Imperial entry grew louder. They were inside the outpost now, methodically searching each room. It would be minutes, perhaps seconds, before they were discovered. If they find us, Sai said quietly, I'll try to hold them off. You run. Find another way out. Amara shook her head. They'll kill you. Probably. Sai agreed. But you're the one with the important information. You're the one who needs to survive this. Amara studied him with those unreadable black eyes. Why did you really help me, Cyrus Aiken? The question caught him off guard, especially the use of his full name, which he hadn't shared with her. Before he could formulate a response, the search party reached the corridor outside their hiding place. Flashlight beams played across the entrance to the recycler room. In here, a voice called. Life signs! Sai raised his blaster as the first Imperial soldier appeared in the doorway, a helmeted figure in the distinctive black armor of Earth's corporate enforcers. He fired twice in quick succession, the energy bolts striking the soldier's chest plate. The armor absorbed the hits, but the impact forced the soldier back, buying them precious seconds. More soldiers appeared, these with shields deployed. Sai's next shots dissipated harmlessly against the energy barriers. The Imperials advanced methodically, their own weapons raised. Surrender immediately, ordered the lead soldier, voice distorted by his helmet's speaker. Drop your weapon. Sai fired again in response, this time aiming for the unprotected areas at the joints of the armor. One bolt found its mark, and a soldier fell with a cry of pain. But there were too many, and they were too well protected. This wasn't a fight he could win. As the Imperials prepared to rush their position, the soldier who had issued the surrender order removed his helmet, revealing a middle-aged man with cold eyes and the insignia of a captain on his collar. Enough of this, he said, his voice carrying authority even without electronic amplification. I am Captain Vol of the Imperial Security Bureau. You are harboring a fugitive and a thief. Hand over the Novalian and the stolen property, and perhaps you'll live to see trial. What stolen property would that be, Captain? Sai asked, playing for time as he tried to come up with a plan, any plan, that didn't end with both of them dead or captured. Vol's expression hardened. Don't play games, scavenger. The biosamples, hand them over now. Behind Sai, Amara had gone very still. Her eyes were closed, her breathing slow and deliberate. At first, he thought she might be losing consciousness again, but then he noticed a faint vibration in the air around them, like the pressure change before a storm. Last chance, Vol warned, signaling his men to prepare to advance. What happened next occurred so quickly that Sai's brain struggled to process the sequence of events. Amara's eyes snapped open, now glowing with an internal purple light. She raised her hands, still clutching the vial, and a wave of energy pulsed outward. Not physical force, but something else. Something that made the air shimmer and the lights flicker. Every piece of electronic equipment in the room, the soldiers' helmet displays, Sai's scanner, even the ancient water recycler, suddenly emitted a high-pitched whine. Sparks flew from control panels. The Imperials staggered, hands going to their helmets as though in pain. In the chaos, the vial in Amara's hand slipped from her fingers, falling toward the floor in what seemed like slow motion. Sai lunged for it, somehow knowing instinctively that if it broke, whatever was inside, virus or cure, could be lost forever. His fingers closed around the vial just before it hit the ground. But the momentum of his dive carried him forward into a bank of machinery. The impact jarred his hand, and he felt rather than heard the crystal container crack. A thin stream of liquid, colorless but somehow shimmering with wrongness, began to seep from the fissure. Captain Vole, recovering faster than his men, saw what had happened. "Containment breach," he shouted. "Biohazard protocols." The soldiers immediately began to retreat, their training overriding even Vole's authority in the face of potential contamination. Vole himself hesitated, torn between duty and self-preservation. His gaze locked with Sai's for a moment, hatred and frustration evident in his eyes, before he too backed away. "This isn't over, scavenger," he promised, before following his men. Sai barely registered the Imperial's departure. His attention was fixed on the leaking vial in his hand and the growing puddle of liquid on the floor. Without thinking, he unscrewed his water canteen, his last supply, and poured it over the spill, diluting whatever had escaped. "Was that the virus or the cure?" he asked Amara urgently. "Virus," she confirmed. Voice strained. The glow had faded from her eyes, and she looked exhausted, as though whatever she had done to drive away the Imperials had drained her completely. "Water." "Good. Neutralizes outside host." Sai carefully placed the cracked vial on a shelf, away from where they might accidentally disturb it further. "What did you do to them?" Amara sank to the floor, her energy apparently spent. Telepathic, overload, pushed fear, disorientation into their systems, not minds, electronic interference. "You can affect machines with your mind?" Sai was incredulous. "Not usually. Extreme circumstances." She gestured weakly at the pouch on her suit. "Second vial, intact. Cure." Sai checked the outpost entrance through the recycler room's doorway. The Imperial transport was already lifting off, its occupants apparently unwilling to risk exposure to an unknown biological agent. It was a standard protocol: retreat, report, return with specialized containment teams. They had bought themselves time, but not much. "We need to move before they come back with a hazmat unit," Sai urged, helping Amara to her feet. "Can you walk?" She nodded, though she leaned heavily on him. "Foothills, rebel outpost, 20 kilometers west. 20 kilometers across open desert with Imperial forces in pursuit. Not impossible, but far from ideal. Still, they had no better options." They emerged from the outpost into the desert night, now fully dark save for the light of Iridia's 3 moons. The air had turned bitter cold, their breath forming clouds of vapor before their faces. Sai adjusted his thermal jacket to share its warmth with Amara as they began their journey west. For the first hour, they walked in silence, conserving energy and watching the skies for signs of Imperial return. The desert was eerily beautiful at night. The crimson sands turned silver by moonlight, the dunes casting long shadows like frozen waves. In another context, Sai might have appreciated the stark grandeur of the landscape. Now, he saw only the dangers it concealed and the distance they still had to cover. "Why did you really help me?" Amara asked again, breaking the silence. Her voice was stronger now, though still bearing the melodic accent of her species. This time, Sai considered the question more carefully. "I told you, I've left someone behind before. Didn't want to do it again." "More than that," Amara insisted. "Saw it when we touched. Something deeper." Sai sighed. He'd never been comfortable with introspection, preferring action to analysis of his motivations. But something about this alien woman, her directness, perhaps, or the sense that she could see through pretense, made evasion seem pointless. "When I was a kid on Earth," he began hesitantly. "Before the corporate takeovers, before the Civil War, I used to believe in things: justice, helping others, making a difference." He shook his head at his own naivety. Life beat that out of me pretty thoroughly. By the time I was salvaging on Nexus 7, I thought I'd become practical. Survival first, always. But you haven't, Amara observed. Not really. No, Sai admitted. Not really. When those people died, the family, Morrow, I told myself it was because I'd been foolishly idealistic, that if I'd been practical, focused on the salvage instead of the rescue, at least Marrow and I would have survived. He paused. But that's not what haunts me. What haunts me is that I couldn't save them. Not that I tried. Amara nodded, as though his confession confirmed something she already knew. Guilt is heavy burden, shapes choices. Yeah. Sai glanced at her. What about you? Why risk everything to steal this virus and its cure? You could have escaped without them, had a better chance of survival. Now it was Amara's turn to consider her answer carefully. My people. Connected. Not just family units. Species-wide consciousness. Partial telepathic link. What happens to one affects all. So it's self-preservation, Sai suggested. Saving your own kind means saving yourself. Amara shook her head. More. Responsibility. Knowledge brings duty. She touched the pouch containing the remaining vial. I helped create this, unwillingly, but still. My work. My responsibility to stop it. They lapsed into silence again, each contemplating the choices that had led them to this moment. Trudging across an alien desert with Imperial forces hunting them. Two beings from different worlds, different species, united by a shared sense of responsibility neither had fully acknowledged until now. The foothills appeared on the horizon just as the first light of dawn began to paint the eastern sky. Low, rocky prominences rising from the desert floor. They marked the beginning of the mountain range that served as the primary stronghold of the Rebel Alliance. Somewhere among those hills was safety, if they could reach it before the Imperials returned. As they approached the first rocky outcroppings, Sai's scanner emitted a warning tone. He checked the display and cursed. Imperial transport, coming in fast from the east. They must have tracked us somehow. Amara touched her environmental suit. Residual particles from virus leak, they're following contamination trail. The transport was still several minutes away, but it was moving much faster than they could on foot. The foothills offered some cover, but not enough to hide from a determined aerial search. They needed a diversion. I have an idea, Sai said, unslinging his pack. He removed a small device, a salvaged Imperial transponder he'd been planning to sell to Rebel contacts. This broadcasts an emergency distress signal on Imperial frequencies. If I activate it and leave it here, they might think we've been injured or separated. Amara frowned. They'll know. Trap. Maybe. Sai conceded. But it might make them cautious. Buy us time to reach the Rebel outpost. He activated the device and wedged it into a crevice between two rocks. Let's move. They continued into the foothills, their progress slowed by the increasingly rough terrain. Amara's strength was failing again, the exertion of their flight and her use of telepathic abilities taking a visible toll. Sai found himself supporting more of her weight with each passing minute. Behind them, the Imperial transport arrived at the location of the transponder. Through his scanner, Sai monitored their communications, confusion, suspicion, orders to deploy search teams in a standard pattern. The diversion had worked, at least partially. The Imperials weren't immediately pursuing their actual trail, but spreading out to search the area systematically. Just a little farther. Sai encouraged Amara as they climbed a particularly steep slope. The outpost should be just beyond this ridge. They crested the hill and found themselves looking down into a small valley. Nestled against the far slope was a collection of structures, prefabricated buildings arranged around a central courtyard, with a communications array on the highest point, the Rebel outpost, just as Amara had described. But between them and safety lay an open expanse of rocky ground, completely exposed to aerial observation. And worse, Psy's scanner now showed Imperial search teams moving in their direction, having apparently discovered the deception of the transponder. "We'll never make it across before they spot us," Psy muttered, assessing the situation. Amara studied the valley, then pointed to a narrow ravine that cut across their path. "There, shadow, cover." The ravine wasn't a perfect solution. It didn't extend all the way to the outpost, but it would conceal them for part of the journey. Psy nodded agreement, and they began making their way down toward it. They had almost reached the ravine when the sound of an Imperial transport passing overhead froze them in place. Psy pulled Amara against the lee of a large boulder, praying the shadow would be enough to hide them from casual observation. The transport continued past without slowing, apparently focused on the outpost itself. "They haven't seen us yet," Psy whispered. "Let's move." They slipped into the ravine and followed its winding course toward the valley floor. The walls rose on either side, providing welcome concealment but also limiting their visibility. Psy kept one eye on his scanner, tracking the movements of the Imperial search teams. They were closing in, methodically eliminating possible hiding places. The ravine ended abruptly about 200 meters from the outpost, too far for a direct sprint, especially given Amara's condition. Psy peered cautiously over the edge, assessing their options. The Imperial transport had landed near the outpost's entrance, disgorging a squad of soldiers who now stood guard. Captain Vole was visible among them, issuing orders and gesturing toward the surrounding hills. "They've got the place surrounded," Psy reported grimly. "No way in without being seen." Amara leaned against the ravine wall. Her breathing labored. The wound in her side had reopened, fresh stains spreading across her environmental suit. Need. Distraction. Bigger than before. Psy considered their limited resources: the blaster, nearly depleted, his multi-tool, a few emergency supplies, nothing that would create a diversion significant enough to draw away an entire Imperial squad. Then his gaze fell on Amara's pouch, specifically on the remaining vial within, the cure for the bioweapon. Their entire reason for this desperate flight across the desert. "No," he said, answering his own unspoken thought. "Too risky, too valuable." Amara followed his gaze and understood immediately. Last resort, she agreed, but maybe necessary. Before they could discuss the matter further, Psy's scanner emitted an urgent alert. Imperial soldiers had found the ravine and were approaching from behind. Simultaneously, the troops at the outpost began to move in their direction, clearly responding to the discovery. They were about to be caught in a pincer movement. "Decision time," Psy said grimly. Amara met his gaze, her alien eyes conveying a resolve that transcended species differences. She reached into her pouch and withdrew the second vial, this one still intact, filled with a liquid that shimmered with a faint purplish hue. "The cure," she confirmed, "more valuable than either of us." Psy understood what she was suggesting. The vial itself wasn't important, it was the formula, the knowledge it represented. If Amara could deliver that knowledge to the rebels, the physical sample was expendable. "You memorized the formula," he guessed. Amara nodded. "Complete molecular structure, can reproduce if, reach safety." Psy took the vial from her carefully. "Then let's make sure you reach safety." He checked his scanner one last time. The Imperial forces were closing in from both directions. They had perhaps 2 minutes before discovery. "I'll create a diversion. When I give the signal, run for the outpost, don't stop, don't look back." "They'll kill you," Amara protested, echoing her earlier warning. Psy managed a grim smile. "Not if I can help it. But the cure is what matters here. You said it yourself. Responsibility comes with knowledge." He squeezed her shoulder gently. "This is me being responsible." Before she could argue further, Psy slipped over the edge of the ravine and moved laterally, putting distance between himself and Amara while remaining hidden from Imperial view. Once he judged he was far enough away. He activated his scanner's emergency beacon, a different signal from the transponder he'd left behind, but one that would immediately alert the Imperials to his position. As expected, the nearest search team changed course, heading directly for his location. Sai waited until they were close, then fired his blaster into the air. 3 rapid shots that couldn't be mistaken for anything but deliberate attention-seeking. "Hey, Imperials!" he shouted. "Looking for something?" He held up the vial, making sure the purple liquid within caught the morning sunlight. Then he ran, not toward the outpost, but parallel to it, drawing the Imperial forces away from both Amara and her destination. The soldiers pursued immediately, as did the squad from the outpost, leaving only a minimal guard at the entrance. Sai glanced back once to see Amara emerging from the ravine, moving with surprising speed toward the rebel stronghold. Good. His diversion was working. Now he just had to survive it. Sai sprinted across the rocky terrain, using every bit of cover available. Energy bolts from Imperial weapons struck around him, but their accuracy was compromised by the need to avoid hitting the vial he carried. That advantage wouldn't last forever, though, eventually, they would adjust their tactics or bring in specialized equipment to disable rather than kill him. He reached a cluster of boulders and ducked behind them, momentarily hidden from his pursuers. The vial felt heavy in his hand, its contents gently swirling with each movement. The key to saving an entire species. And he was using it as bait. Amara had trusted him with it, believing in his commitment to their shared cause. A new plan formed in Sai's mind, reckless, perhaps suicidal, but potentially effective. He waited until the Imperial forces had spread out to surround his position, then made his move. Emerging from cover, he spotted Captain Vol directing the operation from a position of relative safety. Sai aimed carefully and fired his blaster, not at Vol, but at a point just above his head. The shot struck rock, sending fragments flying. Vol ducked instinctively, then straightened with fury evident even at a distance. "You want this, Captain?" Sai called, holding up the vial. "Come and get it yourself." It was a calculated insult, designed to provoke the officer into personal action rather than cautious military procedure. Vol's expression confirmed that the provocation had worked. He gestured sharply to his men to hold their positions, then advanced alone toward Sai's location, his own weapon drawn. "Surrender the sample, and I'll consider making your death quick," Vol offered as he approached. Sai emerged fully from cover, the vial held prominently in one hand, his blaster in the other. "Here's my counter-offer," he replied. "Let the Novalian go, and I'll give you the vial intact." Vol laughed coldly. "You're in no position to negotiate, scavenger. The alien will be recaptured. The formula will be reproduced. All you're doing is ensuring your own painful interrogation before execution." "Maybe," Sai acknowledged. "But I'm guessing your superiors won't be too happy if you return without this." He raised the vial higher, especially after losing the first sample. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Vol's face, quickly replaced by determination. "Enough talk. Hand it over now, or I'll have my men open fire. They might not kill you immediately, but you'll wish they had." Sai pretended to consider the ultimatum, all the while watching the rebel outpost from the corner of his eye. Amara had nearly reached the entrance. Just a few more seconds. "All right," he said finally. "You win, Captain. Catch." With that, he tossed the vial high into the air, directly toward Vol. The Imperial officer's eyes tracked the spinning container, his body tensing to catch it. In that moment of distraction, Sai fired his blaster, not at Vol, but at the vial itself. The energy bolt struck the crystal container at the apex of its arc. The vial shattered spectacularly, its contents dispersing in a fine purple mist that descended over Vol and the nearest Imperial soldiers. Chaos erupted immediately. Vol staggered backward, frantically wiping at his face and exposed skin. His men broke formation, some rushing to their commander's aid, others retreating in fear of contamination. Their discipline, so evident moments before, dissolved in the face of potential infection by an unknown biological agent. Sai used the confusion to make his escape, sprinting toward the rebel outpost where Amara had now disappeared inside. Imperial soldiers fired after him, but their shots went wide. their attention divided between pursuit and concern for their exposed comrades. He was halfway to the outpost when a searing pain tore through his left shoulder. An Imperial energy bolt had found its mark. Sai stumbled but kept moving. Right arm clutched to his wounded side. The outpost entrance was just ahead. Rebel defenders now visible, providing covering fire against the pursuing Imperials. With a final surge of effort, Sai crossed the threshold into Rebel territory. Hands pulled him to safety as the reinforced doors slammed shut behind him. The sounds of Imperial weapons fire became muted, then ceased altogether as the rebels' defensive systems activated, creating an energy shield around the perimeter. Sai found himself in a medical bay, rebel medics attending to his wounded shoulder. The pain was intense but manageable. More importantly, Amara was there, already receiving treatment for her own injuries. Their eyes met across the room, and she offered a small smile of recognition and relief. "You made it," she said simply. "So did you," Sai replied. "The formula." Already shared with rebel scientists, work begins on mass production. Amara's expression turned somber. "The vial?" "Destroyed," Sai admitted. "It was the only way to create enough confusion for escape." He expected disappointment, perhaps even anger. But Amara nodded acceptance. Right choice, knowledge preserved, sample expendable. A rebel officer approached them, a tall woman with the insignia of a commander on her uniform. "You two have caused quite a stir," she observed. "The Imperials are in full retreat, apparently concerned about biological contamination. Would either of you care to explain what that's about?" Amara briefly outlined the situation: the bioweapon project, her escape with the formula, and their journey across the desert. The commander listened intently, her expression growing more serious with each revelation. "This changes things," she said when Amara had finished. "A targeted bioweapon violates every treaty the Empire claims to uphold. With proof of such a project, we could potentially sway neutral systems to our cause." She turned to Sai. "And you helped her escape, despite the risk to yourself. Why?" Sai glanced at Amara before answering. "Let's just say I've been leaving people behind for too long. Thought it was time for a change." The commander studied him thoughtfully. "The rebellion could use people with your skills and evolving moral compass. There would be payment, of course, better than what you'd make as a scavenger." It was an offer Sai hadn't expected and wasn't sure he wanted. He'd spent years avoiding causes, commitments, responsibilities. The prospect of joining the rebellion, of declaring a side in the civil war he'd tried so hard to simply survive, was daunting. "I'll think about it," he said noncommittally. The commander nodded. "Do that." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Aiken? That Imperial captain, Vol? He's going to have quite a story to tell his superiors about bioweapon exposure." "The cure was in that vial, wasn't it?" Sai asked Amara after the commander had departed. "Not the virus." Amara's expression remained neutral, but those alien eyes held a hint of amusement. "Yes, harmless to humans, might cause minor skin discoloration. Temporary." Sai laughed despite the pain in his shoulder. "So Captain Vol and his men are going to turn purple for a while? I wish I could see that." "Small justice," Amara agreed, "but satisfying." They fell silent, each contemplating what would come next. Sai's wound would heal. Amara's knowledge would help protect her species. The rebellion would gain valuable intelligence against the Empire. Yet these facts seemed almost secondary to the more personal transformation that had occurred over the past 24 hours. "What will you do now?" Amara asked eventually. Sai considered the question. The commander's offer was tempting in its way. Purpose, resources, a chance to be part of something larger than mere survival. But years of self-reliance were not easily set aside. "I don't know," he admitted. "Joining the rebellion means choosing a side, making a commitment. I'm not sure I'm ready for that." "Not all commitments political," Amara observed, "some personal." She extended her hand tentatively. those many-jointed fingers hovering just above his uninjured arm. Sai hesitated only briefly before reaching up to meet her touch. The contact was cool and strange, but not unpleasant. More importantly, it carried a sense of connection that transcended their physical differences, a shared understanding born of their journey together. Personal commitments, Sai repeated thoughtfully, like helping a voice in a crate, or risking everything to preserve knowledge. Amara added, outside the medical bay window, dawn had fully broken over the desert. The crimson sands glowed gold in the morning light. The endless dunes transformed from threatening obstacles into a landscape of possibility. Somewhere out there, an empty crate lay half buried in sand, its latch hanging open, a reminder of choices made and consequences accepted. Sai looked at Amara. At this being so different from himself, yet connected by shared experience and purpose. Perhaps commitments weren't always burdens to be avoided. Perhaps sometimes they were paths forward, opportunities rather than constraints. I think, he said slowly, I might stick around for a while, see where this goes. Amara's hand tightened slightly on his arm, her touch conveying what words could not fully express. Good choice, Cyrus Aiken. For once. Right choice. As the rebel outpost came fully to life around them, preparations already underway to counter the Imperial bioweapon threat, Sai found himself contemplating a future he hadn't imagined possible 24 hours earlier. Not just survival, but purpose. Not just existence, but connection. All because he'd listened to a voice pleading from within a crate buried in the endless sands of Iridia Prime, and then chosen to ignore its warning to leave it unopened. Some crates, it seemed, were meant to be opened, despite the risks. Some voices were meant to be heeded, despite the dangers. And some journeys were meant to transform those who undertook them, whether they sought transformation or not. Dawn light spilled across the medical bay, illuminating Sai and Amara in its golden glow. Outside, the desert stretched to the horizon, crimson and vast and beautiful in its harsh way. Behind them lay the past, with all its mistakes and regrets. Before them lay possibility, unknown but full of potential. For the first time in years, Cyrus Aiken found himself looking forward rather than back. Whatever came next, rebellion, danger, further challenges, he would face it alongside this unexpected ally from a distant world, not alone, as he had been for so long, not adrift, as he had believed was his fate. Connected, committed, chosen. Amara's hand rested on his, steady and certain. The desert dawn painted the world in new colors. And somewhere in the distance, Imperial forces retreated, their certainty shaken, their plans disrupted. It was, Sai decided, a promising beginning.